thank you so much if you're joining me today. I'm admittedly in a bit of a random mood. I kind of feel like reading some of my own writing, and I thought in doing so, I would share with you some of the inspirations that went into it. What I'm focusing on today is Seven for a Secret. This was my debut novel, and I just do the finger quotes because it was actually the second novel that I wrote, but it was the first one to be published. And everything I've written is near and dear to me for one reason or another. Early works especially, just because I feel like a bit more autobiographical information went into those, I confess. And in the years to follow, less and less that's the case. This was definitely a Valentine, though, to my 20s, living in Chicago, single. It has a present and past story thread alternating between the two, and as the story goes on, you learn how the two timelines intersect. And of course, because I love my ghosties, there's a supernatural explanation for it, also a geographical explanation for it. It's following two protagonists in separate times who lived in the same building. And this is something, I wrote after living in London for a few years and feeling so homesick, and writing was a way for me to work through a lot of my thoughts and feelings, but also to go back, transcend time and space, and rewalk some of the steps I had taken in years past. And I just had a lot of fun writing this story. So I guess that's why all these years later, I'm kind of itching to read it again, because I believe I'm a granny now, so let me get my glasses on. And of course I say granny figuratively because I don't even have children to also have grandchildren, but 2014. So this was published 11 years ago. And the title, Seven for a Secret, which at the time I thought was so super original, but if you Google it, there's at least one other book with the same title. But it's taken from an old nursery rhyme: 1 for sorrow, 2 for mirth, 3 for a wedding, 4 for a birth, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, 8 for heaven, 9 for hell, and 10 for the devil himself. Wow. So I love the print version of this. This doesn't really carry over into the Kindle, but the typesetter I thought did a beautiful job trying to bring in a bit of Art Deco into it, because the past story thread is set in the 1920s. And I say the present story thread, but that is also technically in the past. It's set in the year 2000. So it's not like today, but at least like contemporary versus that more distant past. And I had my reasons for setting it during that time. First of all, just made some certain logistical things in the story make more sense to have it timed that way between, year 2000 and 1920s. Like, for the ages of certain characters, certain things had to align. But it also was just really fun to go back to Y2K when I would have been, again, living single in Chicago and just being a moron, finding my way. But anyway, I just thought, that I would just start at the beginning and maybe just read through a few scenes, and then, like I said, share with you some of the personal tidbits that kind of worked their way into it. Sometimes something that really helped influence a character or a plot point, and sometimes it really was just a little Easter egg to stick in there just for my own amusement. So anyway, I've got my Chicago White Sox hat on, so travel with me, if you will, through time and space to Chicago, June 2000, as I begin Chapter 1. The pavement bore no traces of the body that had burst against it 6 months ago on New Year's Eve. Young Kate Penbrook stepped around that spot all the same as she toured Camden Court Apartments. Leo, one of the residents and her guide, had just explained how the Leaper, as neighbors now called the dead man, had led a solitary life, as far as anyone could tell. And in a place like this, he said, anyone could tell. Quite a lot, in fact, at least the ones who'd stuck around long enough. Kate was just about to learn the Leaper's real name when a shrill scream sounded from above. "You all right up there, Vera?" Leo cried, shading his pale eyes from the noon sun with a vein-gnarled hand. Though he stood tall and appeared able-bodied enough, Kate estimated that he was in his 80s. "Oh, you scoundrel!" the raspy voice seethed just before a head peeped out over a fourth-floor window ledge. Short blonde curls with silver roots formed a bright halo around a face darkened against the sky. "Vera?" Leo asked again. "What did you just call me?" "Not you, ya coot. You would never believe what that old bat allowed to happen in here. My word." The golden head withdrew from sight. Kate looked to Leo with a raised brow and timid smile. He merely shrugged and shooed the upper window away with his hand. "That's Vera, another neighbor," was all he said. "So I figured." Kate grinned and scanned the courtyard as though any further questions she had about the building might be hidden in its hedges. Just then, she heard the fourth-floor window grind open wider in its frame. "Just look at this, will you?" A sprinkling of drops anointed Kate's forehead as she squinted up at Vera, who was spastically shaking something over the window ledge. Something small, dark, dangling. Kate screamed this time. "Man alive, Vera!" Leo shouted. "What in God's name are you doing? Nice way to greet our new neighbor. This is Kate." "Gracious," Vera cried. "You're not to live here, are you, hun? In this apartment, I mean?" "Yeah, as of July." "My word," Vera crossed herself with the dead mouse still hanging from her fingers by its tail. Leo winced. "If you want to drop that down here, I'll bury it for you." She spun the rodent like a helicopter propeller before flinging it clear across the courtyard. It smacked against the opposite brick wall with a sickening wet slap and dropped into a rose bush. "God's sake, woman," Leo muttered, then raised his voice to ask her, "Where'd you come across that wet thing anyhow? The drain?" "The kettle," Vera bellowed before slamming the window closed. Kate had yet to find her tongue. She watched the old man lumber across the yard, yanking a white handkerchief from his pocket. If he was to offer the rodent proper funeral rites beneath the morning glories, it wasn't going to happen right then. He just dug a shallow divot with his heel, laid the mouse carcass inside, covered it with the hanky, and kicked some loose dirt over it. As he walked back, scuffing his palms against the thighs of his denim overalls, Kate had enough time to retrieve her voice. "So, that is my place, isn't it?" "Afraid so," Leo said. "But don't you mind what Vera says. That woman needs to watch less television and stop inventing these damn soap operas in her head." The scowl left his countenance, and his mild, gray-eyed gaze met Kate's directly. "Don't you mind now. The place is a little tired, that's all. In need of some sprucing up. The previous tenant had lived there over 70 years, if you can believe it." 70 years. That was almost triple the time Kate had lived, period, let alone in one place. "But don't worry, that place will be whipped into tip-top shape before you move in. Cable and internet ready. I'll see to that personally." Kate mulled over the man's soft sell. Unorthodox for sure. Suicides and dead rodents weren't the stuff of better homes and gardens, yet the man's nervous attempts to impress her all morning cast an endearing, if not morbid, amusement to the situation. She extended her hand to meet his firm handshake. "Thank you, Leo. I'm excited about living in Lincoln Park. This is an awesome location by the park and lake, and it cuts down my commute to the Adler." "The Adler Planetarium? You an astronomer or something?" Kate laughed. "Not quite. I supervise learning activities for the visitors. Anyway, thanks again." She made a turn but caught herself. "Oh, and where's the nearest bus stop?" "Just around the block there, at Wrightwood and Clark." "Great. And when do you think I could view the actual apartment? I know the layout's identical to yours, but you're already looking to move in July 1st, right?" "Right." Tuesday all right with you then? He rubbed the back of his neck, and before Kate could answer, he said, you know, I'm sure if you're not happy with the unit upstairs, another will be on the market soon enough. Kate thought she heard him mutter, at this rate, but it was buried too deeply beneath his breath to know for sure. Tuesday's fantastic. Thanks again, Leo. And scene 1. A few things just in that first section, starting with the character's name, Kate Pembroke. Well, Kate is taken from my middle name, which is Catherine. And the surname Pembroke I took from the local pub that was just around the corner from my flat where I first lived after moving to London with my husband. And the apartment complex that she's touring, Camden Court Apartments, is based on the real-life Hampton Court Apartments where I lived. It was the last apartment building that I lived in before I moved out of the city of Chicago to go back out to the suburbs and start my teaching career. I pulled a 180 in careers starting out in finance and living and working in the city in Lincoln Park, where this is also set. So again, my old stomping grounds. It was just a really fun way for me to continue touring that old neighborhood, and I loved my little studio apartment at that place. Oh, very much. And I guess another significance with that name, though I lived in Hampton Court, I named it Camden Court. Obviously sounds the same, but also just in honor of Camden Town here in London. So then I guess another Chicago tidbit would be, where the bus stop is situated, Wrightwood and Clark. That used to be where I would catch the bus to commute downtown for work. And the Adler Planetarium, I never worked there, but I volunteered there. I assisted the education department with activities with the kids, and that was actually a pivotal experience for me that got me to pull the 180 that I did from the corporate world to become a teacher. But anyway, let's just go a little further and see what else I can unearth here for you. It's been a while since I've read this, to be honest. Tuesday had come and gone, as had the remainder of June, and Kate had moved into her new residence at Camden Court Apartments, a studio, all to herself. It was July 1st, a Saturday. At her bathroom sink, she ran cool, slick hands over her brow bone and cheeks, then patted her palms dry on her khaki shorts. Mental note, unpack towels next. As she made to leave, the smooth knob of the door's antique glass and brass handle slipped in Kate's damp palm. She ran her hand along her bare thigh with more determination and grabbed the clear glass knob again with a tighter grip, turned it, and pulled. The door wouldn't give. She gave another little tug. Nothing. Blowing frustration out of her nose, Kate grasped with both hands and gave a solid yank. The knob finally did move toward her. The door, unfortunately, did not. Shit. Kate looked down at the knob in her hand, gleaming like a giant gemstone. A big, gaudy, worthless gemstone that she dropped to the tiles before resting her fingertips at the gaping space where the knob should have stayed. With delicacy, she pinched the thin metal rod poking through from the other side and gave it a little twist to no avail. She squeezed it harder and twisted and jiggled it more until she only succeeded in causing the knob on the opposite side of the door to fall out as well. Shit! Oh shit! Kate pawed at the hole in the door and tried sticking a pinky finger through it. Bending down, she peeked through and saw only the cavernous dark of her doorless closet across the hall. Had Leo said he'd be checking in sometime that day? Shit. No, that was tomorrow. But surely Dex would come over that night, eager as he was to check out her new bachelorette pad and probably test the springs of the college futon she'd resurrected from her parents' basement for her first unfurnished apartment. Not exactly giving her the breathing room she'd asked for, but she'd welcome his doting on this occasion. Could she survive until evening? It was time to appraise her desert island scenario. She had water. That was key. She could live on water for a while. And she had access to the toilet, which was a nice feature. No need to lose her civility and Lord of the Flies her way through this one. She hadn't unpacked her toiletries yet, but she could still shower without soap. That had to count for something. The shower. There was a window in the shower. She flung the clear plastic curtain aside and bounded into the tub toward the small window overlooking the courtyard. The window that would have overlooked the courtyard, rather, if it hadn't been for the privacy glass textured all over with little retro sunbursts. Kate gripped the handle to lift the pane upward. Nothing. She tried again and again. Sealed shut with paint, or maybe just locked. So she went to unlatch it and found that at least a decade's worth of paint had sealed it in place for eternity. Oh my God, if it was locked when they painted over it. Kate stumbled backward out of the tub and, sitting on the toilet lid, did her best to slow her breathing. She tried to keep down the flutter of panic thudding against her breastbone as the double-edged sword of living on her own now pointed at her jugular. She'd known it was too good to be true, that she'd been too smug as she'd woven through her cityscape of moving boxes like Godzilla and descended on her dishware, reveled a little too much as she'd set to unpacking her plates, hers, her own, not Dexter's, not for now. She eyed the rusted valve of her bathroom radiator. If she made it out of here alive, these vintage features would be something to get used to after the newer build condo she'd shared with Dex. The one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan and the stream of traffic on Lakeshore Drive. No reflection on their means. Dex had simply gotten lucky with a wealthy uncle who had no other use for it once he was past the real estate phase of his midlife crisis, and Kate had lived there all of 3 months before she'd freaked out that things were moving too fast. Poor Dex, she thought. He's been patient. They'd been dating exclusively for close to a year and a half now and had been friends and colleagues for longer than that. Both on staff in the Adler Planetarium's education department, they'd had an instant kismet connection over their shared nerdy love of the universe and bringing it down to earth for the public through demonstrations and workshops. They had good chemistry as co-teachers, but Dex also made her laugh and feel like the most attractive, interesting being on the planet. His kind eyes and tall, lean swimmer's build hadn't hurt his chances with her either. But more than that, he just felt like home. Kate couldn't describe it, only knew that his simple presence put her at ease. Until it hadn't. After the initial passion, Kate worried that maybe her feeling of home around Dex was becoming a sisterly affection more than anything. She thought living together would reignite the spark by shaking things up a little, forcing her out of her comfort zone and causing some fights over toothpaste or dirty laundry that would lead to great kitchen counter makeup sex afterward or something. Instead, nothing. The fights happened, on her end anyway, but he'd always been quick to apologize and diffuse the situation. She'd moved into the comfort zone, and he'd made it easy, too easy. And Kate wasn't resigned to settling down like a couple of old folks just yet. She was only in her mid-20s. She loved Dexter, and they were still boyfriend-girlfriend by definition, but in moving out, she wanted to shake things up again for their own good. Wasn't it enough that they saw each other all day at the Adler? Didn't they need some absence to make the heart grow fonder and all that jazz? Kate sighed, and another minute of finding patterns in the little white hexagonal floor tiles had calmed her enough to return to the matter at hand. She stood a 50-50 chance that the bathroom window was unlatched under that gob of paint. She stepped back into the tub. With all her might, she braced one foot behind her on the side of the bath for leverage, and, with both palms against the window frame, heaved upward. Nothing. Her breath quickened even more, and her heart thumped as the room closed in on her. "Please," she whimpered. On the count of 3, she summoned all the adrenaline coursing through her and pushed again so hard she thought her face might pop. Her arms and thighs trembled under the force until, with a tearing sound and then a louder crack, the window pane shoved upward. Fresh air and sunlight hit Kate's face. Oh! With hands still manning their positions at the raised frame, she arched her back and looked to the ceiling in exultation, then hunched to rest her forehead against the window handle. And that's when she saw it. A gathering of sorts in the courtyard below. Tables were arranged in a U shape with a bunch of old-timers milling about piles of wares and clothing. Above the polite-sounding banter rose Vera's squawk. She appeared to run whatever show was going on. Kate saw her building door open, too, just in time to catch a thick mess of wavy dark brown hair walk outside. She watched as the young, fit, masculine body beneath it exited through the courtyard gate to the street, escaping without a word. Ah, well, she'd have been too embarrassed to beseech a hot stranger for help anyway. "Vera! Hello?" she called down at last. The golden helmet head swiveled this way and that before looking up. "Vera, hey!" She attempted a feeble yoo-hoo type whistle. "Up here!" When their gazes met, Kate saw Vera's little body give a start and throw a hand to her forehead to shield her eyes from the sun. The woman slumped with an obvious exhale, as if relieved to see it was Kate and not whoever she thought it was. "Hey, dear girl," she called up. "Why don't you come down here and join us?" I would with pleasure, but there was just no cool way to explain her predicament in front of all these people. "Actually, would you mind coming up here for a second?" "I can't leave things, dear girl. Just come down." Well, Kate looked around at a bird-like little lady stroking a ceramic poodle as an older gentleman inspected the bindings of a stack of faded hardcover books. A tortoiseshell tabby cat sunned itself in the grass at Vera's feet. "I will, but could you please, just for one quick second?" "Nonsense. I'll see you when you come down." "Oh, Vera, please, just really quick." A cloud came across the old woman's expression and she stood a little taller. "Are you all right?" she asked, dismissing the poodle lady who had just asked her whether there was a shade to go with the rooster lamp. "Has something happened?" "Yeah, unfortunately, and I could really use your help." With no further questions or even a word of notice to anyone else at her little garden party, Vera scooped the cat up from its splendor in the grass and made a beeline for the door to Kate's wing of the building. Kate hoped, the woman was making her way up the stairwell, so she stepped out of the tub to sit patiently on the toilet seat. Within a minute, she heard Vera shouting and knocking at her unit door. "Kate? Kate?" The knocking grew more urgent. Kate stood and pressed her face to a panel in the bathroom door. "Come in, Vera." She bent down and yelled again through the hole. "Door's unlocked. Come inside." She heard the unit door creak open and the shuffle of Vera's quick footsteps. "Kate? Kate, where are you, Kate?" Vera shouted, as if that was necessary in such a tiny apartment. Vera's voice traveled down the hall and Kate banged on the bathroom door. "In here!" "Gracious," she heard as Vera scraped up and down the other side of the door. The next sound was the jostling of the doorknob rod back through the hole, and there it was, jiggling and twisting again under an unseen force until the door yawned open and Kate could breathe again. She thanked Vera profusely, spilling out of the bathroom and inviting her neighbor to have a seat. Seeing the woman purse her lips as her eyes appeared to scan the chaos of unpacking limbo, Kate shoved aside a giant wardrobe box to reveal a portion of her futon not piled with shoes and clothes, and pointed to it. Tightrope walking her way through the clutter to a small wooden folding chair, Kate kicked aside a cardboard box labeled bedroom and had a seat. Bedroom. That was a laugh. In this studio apartment, bedroom would have to equal living room, just like bed and sofa would equal futon. The dumbbell shape of the studio gave her some semblance of a proper apartment, at least. A small hallway connected the room where they sat to the kitchen, which was set off at the opposite end at its own separate room, complete with a glass-paneled mahogany door to reinforce the illusion of space. In her mind, Kate was already calling the kitchen the West Wing, as though a library and conservatory could also be found behind that door if one looked hard enough. Kate's gaze roamed the living room/bedroom during what had grown into an awkward silence with Vera. Midday natural light pierced through the two large windows facing the courtyard, obstructed only by a grimy pair of cheap plastic blinds and a loudly humming air conditioning unit. Avoiding eye contact with her neighbor, Kate looked around at the fuzzy lines of gray already accumulating on the rectangular wall moldings, which had only just been painted a couple of days ago. The apartment painting had nearly set her move-in back, in fact. Leo had supervised the work and phoned her with much regret to inform her that, no matter how many coats they'd applied, the yellow stains of neglect kept seeping through in spots. She'd assured him it wasn't a problem, so the painters had ceased and desisted. She could see some of that jaundice now on the wall behind Vera. Unable to avoid her visitor any longer, Kate looked the woman in the eye. On closer inspection, Vera was older but not elderly. From her upright posture, relatively smooth skin, and sheer spunk, she looked to be in her early 70s. Vera narrowed an eye and finally spoke. "If you haven't noticed, I'm not getting any younger. You gonna tell me when heckfire happened or what?" Picking at her fingernails, Kate swallowed, cleared her throat, and began her tale of the bathroom incident. Her train of thought was occasionally interrupted, though, every time she glanced at the Torby cat, which jumped and spun incessantly in the corner by the unit door. Something on the ceiling seemed to draw its attention, so Kate glanced up, but saw not so much as a fly or moving reflection of light. Now and then, Vera would twist to look as well. By the time Kate had finished explaining, the old woman's widened eyes had settled into a squint. They homed in on Kate, though occasionally twitching in the direction of that crazy dancing cat. Under the intimidation of Vera's concentrated gaze, Kate gave in to the distraction and watched the Torby leap and twirl in the air, pawing at nothing. And then it stopped and just sat on its hind legs in front of the door, shifting its head side to side, as if watching a tennis match on the ceiling. So yeah, Kate spoke up as she dragged her attention from the cat back to Vera's squinting assessment. Anyway, that's what happened with the bathroom door. She waited for some sweet grandmotherly nurturing, but all she got was, well, that was a damn stupid thing to do. Vera stood and looked around at Kate's lack of progress in unpacking, then back at the cat in the doorway. Now come on down to the sale, Kate. Get out of here a while and make yourself useful. Okay, so that was the end of the first chapter. Just give you a little introduction to a few of our main characters. But I think the biggest Easter egg there, certainly not that I ever had a wealthy uncle whose Lakeshore Drive apartment I could live in. Nope, not that. But getting locked in a bathroom, yeah, that's more my speed. Yeah. That exact scene, yeah. Including the panic that the window couldn't be locked or unlocked because the little latch had been painted over and there was just a solid mound of white paint from God knows how many years of just painting over it. And so that was the thought that crossed my mind. Like, oh my God, if this is locked and just sealed in like this, I'm not getting out of here. So, yeah, luckily it wasn't, but my God, did it take some great force of will to just and liberate myself. But then it was really embarrassing because there wasn't an estate sale or an acquaintance that I could recognize downstairs to call out to for help. I just had to sit there and wait until I saw someone leave their own apartment and come out into the courtyard. So it's a U-shaped building, and I was on the one side of the U, so I could see the apartments directly across the way. And so I just hung out in the window, and then I saw this woman, maybe around my age, I don't know, coming out of the door. And so I had to call down from the 4th floor, "Hello, excuse me." So she stopped and looked up and was like, "Hi, weird favor to ask, but I'm actually stuck up here. Could you come up to unit 4F? The door's open. I'm locked in the bathroom here." And so, goddamn, she did it. But then it was just super weird because as soon as she opened the door, I was just like, oh my God. I'm just like gushing with like relief and gratitude and just thanking her. She didn't have anything to say to me. She just like turned around and started walking out. So I like followed her down the stairwell again, just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I know that was so weird. And I'm like laughing at myself and nothing. She just wanted to like get on her way. And so that was awkward. And needless to say, I never saw her again. So that was not a friend to be made at the apartment. But anyways, I had to immortalize that experience in here, and it's not the only time it's going to happen to Kate. Another takeaway there is the tortoiseshell tabby, the Torby cat that I describe here. There was an instance where I observed a cat behaving just like this one did in the corner of that unit, but I'm actually going to save that for after the next excerpt where there's a bit more to the story than that. In the meantime, all I can say is like the layout of the studio, it's just like the one I lived in. Such a big imagination I have, right? Just really copied. But again, like I said, this is like a way for my mind to like exist in a space that I loved. And I still miss that apartment. I really do. And I had a futon. So a lot of Kate's decor, not too unlike mine too. And good times. But anyway, going into the second chapter, which is the last one of this first section before it does shift into the 1920s story thread and introduces that protagonist, which I'll get to in a separate video. Just to skip ahead a little bit, basically what's happening at the outset of that, Kate has gone down to the rummage sale and ends up seeing this like beautiful vintage wingback chair. And so Leo has helped her bring it up to her apartment as additional furnishings that she needs being new there. But Vera seemed really annoyed that she was wanting to buy it. So she doesn't really understand why Vera's so annoyed that she would have wanted this chair, but then she eventually learns from Leo that it had actually belonged to the former occupant of that apartment. And so then she feels bad, like, oh God, they had just moved it down. Now they're bringing it back up. But even so, it was still kind of a weird reaction by Vera. So eventually she goes back downstairs with Leo to help out properly at this sale that's going on in the courtyard. There you are, Vera said. Seated at a table, she counted money with a pencil poking out of her tightened lips. Age lines circled her mouth like eyelashes. Thought Leo might have used your toilet and fallen in. She lurched with a jovial humph. God's sakes, Leo muttered. Anyway, Vera said, I was thinking now that most of the kitschy crap's gone, we can arrange some of the nicer accessories in a more appealing way. Attract the young folks. This stuff all comes back, doesn't it? You kids think everything you do is new and original, but us old farts have seen these things come, go, and come back again. She set to refolding a stack of handkerchiefs, and Kate sat in a lawn chair beside her. So, Kate began as Leo had wandered to the far table of record albums. I forgot to mention before that Leo, I got that name. It was my dad's middle name, so that was my little homage to him. Leo told me the stuff belonged to the woman who lived in my place. Vera kept folding. She was elderly, right? So she's dead? You betcha. In her sleep. God bless her. She started smoothing some doilies. It was 3 days before we found her up in there, right in the middle of that heat wave, and Vera looked up and seemed to register the expression contorting Kate's face. Oh, well, I needn't get into the details. Let's just say heat doesn't do a body good. Kate lost her tongue in Vera's presence all over again. The little lady was sure worth her weight in shock value. Meanwhile, a woman standing opposite Kate's table poked through dish towels and aprons. Her frizzy brown hair, streaked with gray, was cut in a bob and had a plastic barrette haphazardly affixed to one side. Kate guessed she was in her early 50s and fixed a grin to her face in case they made eye contact. But the woman only shot looks out the corner of her eye toward the next table, where a sun-kissed blonde wearing nothing more than a bikini top and Daisy Dukes ran a finger along the fringe trim of a lampshade, giggling at anything the young man standing next to her said. Seems a lonely life, doesn't it? Vera said. Stay cooped up in a place like this. At an older age, anyway. Maisie over there is on her way to it, too. She nodded toward the frizzy-haired woman, and Kate considered her name fitting for someone so mousy. Appearing lost in her thoughts, Vera combed the tassels of a velour scarf with her fingers. You kids probably think us old coots should be in a home by now, but some of us are stronger than that. Some of us have to be. Kate watched Vera's face for an expression that would give something away. The unsaid she felt so sure was there. The only change in that poker face, though, was Vera rolling a sidelong glance toward Kate's legs. Kate wasn't sure if it was in disapproval of her short shorts or avoidance of her eyes. Have you, Vera said, been okay in that apartment so far? Nothing in need of attention? No, Leo and his crew are very thorough. Nothing peculiar? There's a wall that's still a little stained, but whatever, I'm not high maintenance. When Vera didn't comment right away, Kate noticed the Torby cat under the table. Bending over to pet it, she added, Your cat seems to like it. My apartment, I mean. Did she know the deceased? Olive. The deceased was Olive. Cute, Kate replied with perhaps too much enthusiasm. But yes, the cat knew her. It was hers after all. Kate stopped stroking the dead woman's cat and sat up. That's how we found Olive. Little Agatha here was mewing and scratching at the door. A neighbor knocked and tried the knob, but the door was locked. Just in case the cat was left alone with no food out, he'd grabbed some bologna from his fridge and knelt down to feed it through the big gap beneath Olive's door. That's when he caught a whiff of the stench inside and called down to the office immediately. The landlord sent Leo, who brought me in tow. You three were all friends? You could say so. We looked out for each other anyway. Olive got too weak to take the stairs anymore, but she refused to move. So Leo and I would tend to what she needed, groceries and cat food and such. That's really nice. And so you took on Agatha after Olive died? She's company. Nice, Kate lamely said again for lack of other words, until she remembered. So that explains why Agatha was acting so weird by my door, right? She, like, remembers or something? Vera bent to pick Agatha up and set her on her lap. She leaned towards the cat's head and hummed a single note into its fur before saying, something. Her frown turned into a wicked smile as she scratched the cat's throat. Aggie here might still smell something in there, huh, Aggie? Kate's stomach dropped, and though Vera's teasing smile grew as she burrowed it into Agatha's head and giggled away gruffly like a schoolgirl who chain smoked, Kate whispered to herself, you can't be serious. She stood to rummage about the remaining goods and showcase them better to end that conversation. Plucking away an array of silky, filmy headscarves with a clear plastic rain bonnet thrown in the mix, Kate felt sacrilegious rifling through it, like she might as well have been grave robbing and twisting rings off the fingers of corpses, until something sparkling caught the light and darkly dazzled her eyes. Ooh, she exclaimed, what is this? She lifted a little black beaded evening bag from the scarf pile. Vera raised her brows. Oh, that wasn't that mess, was it, huh? She stroked Agatha with an intensity that clearly annoyed the Torby. And you fancy that, huh? It's divine, Kate cooed, holding it up by its inch-thick beaded strap and twirling it this way and that to watch it glitter in the low-angled sunlight. Tiny obsidian beads covered the entire surface of the purse in swirling rows. It looked rectangular from straight on, but from above, Kate could see that the bag was actually an oblong hexagon, with a lid sloping down from the back like a roof and clasping in the front with a concealed snap. She popped it open to finger its black silk interior. Fully intact, no rips or worn patches. Beneath the lid, she noticed the reflective backing of a mirror that had lost its glass. That was its only flaw. In Kate's eyes, it was otherwise a perfect black gem. Sold, she said. Huh? Sold, Vera. I have to have this. How much? You sure you want to be taking more of this stuff back into that apartment? The whole point of the sale was to clear that out. Exercise it. This little thing takes up no space, and I needed the chair anyway. What do I owe you for both? I'm not sure that it's right that Vera leaned to look past her. Leo? He glanced up from the Artie Shaw record album he'd been affectionately gazing at. Leo, Kate is interested in buying a purse now. She wants something else. Oh? Was all he said, the muscles holding up his smile visually steeled beneath his skin. Yes, Kate said, looking from one to the other like they were senile. Perhaps they were. I want to buy this purse also. That all right? She looked to Vera and softened her tone. Sorry, did you want this for yourself? Did you set it out on accident? Maybe that was why Vera had looked surprised to see it in Kate's hands to begin with. No, Vera answered in an octave higher than normal. I just wanted to check with Leo on the price. We took turns tagging items, you see, and I don't believe that purse has one. Kate rotated it around in the air by its strap again. Nope, no tag. She lifted her lips into a smirk. Oh, I see. So Leo is the best one to price a little beaded evening bag? Chuckling, she turned to him. Okay, sir, name your price. You know, in light of the going rate for women's purses like this, what do you see out there on the market? She, in all fairness, tried to stifle her laugh when she saw Leo's farmer tan turn noticeably redder around his cheeks and ears. Just like I said with the chair, free of charge. You're helping us here, so that's payment enough. After some polite protest, Kate finally accepted his terms and planned a generous tip for the building's maintenance crew at Christmas. For the time being, though, she helped Leo and Vera pack up the estate sale and braced herself for returning home to what for 3 days had been a dead woman's tomb. So as far as anything I planted in there, I recognized some things that were at the estate sale. I think these ceramic poodles were in homage to my husband's grandmother, who used to paint ceramic poodles as a little hobby. And the rooster lamp is in reference to my grandmother, and my mom took that lamp, and it is in her home, in the family room. So much treasured item, super kitschy, but it's great. My mom grew up on a chicken farm, and so it's just, yeah, it's very sentimental. Oh, but then the most prominent thing at this sale, though, that I planted in there deliberately, and I didn't grab it, so I'm going to go 1 second. Here is the black beaded bag that Kate found. So here you can see its hexagonal shape, and as described in the story, I've got some stuff in here, but you can see where there was once a mirror here, and all that's left is this reflective backing. But oh my gosh, I found this at the vintage sale, and I had the reaction basically that Kate did, where it's like, oh my God, I just love it. I love it. I just feel like it looks like the night sky, all the stars twinkling. So it's not one that I use often at all. It's mostly just pretty to look at. I just want to make sure that I preserve it. I don't know, any of its history really, but that purse ends up having some significance in this story. And what else? Oh, Artie Shaw. I have Leo looking at an Artie Shaw record album because even though Artie Shaw is not dating back to the 1920s, I think it would be more like 40s. That's what I listened to on repeat as I wrote this story. I loved having like a big band sound. I do best writing to instrumental music. If there's lyrics, it can distract me. And some of the Artie Shaw tunes certainly did have words, but anyway, it just like, again, different decade, but it still was just taking me back. And yeah, it's just a special memory of writing this story. I'll always associate that with Artie Shaw, and I still just love that music so much. So anyways, moving onward. From the confusion of cardboard, bubble wrap, and crumpled newspaper, Kate rose with the one IKEA pot she owned and walked to the kitchen sink to rinse both it and her ink-stained hands. As the gray smudges congealed and streamed off her skin, she eyeballed the stove to her left. It was part of a freestanding oven, a smaller than average appliance that might not even fit a full-size pan inside or her giant pot on top. But that wasn't what disturbed Kate as she inspected the rusty black stove burners. The drain? Leo's voice echoed in her head. The kettle! Blech! Kate shuddered, staring at her own kettle on the stove. How the hell could a mouse even get in there? She opted to hold off on that tea she'd wanted to brew and filled her pot with water instead. Screw tea anyway. It was happy hour. She plopped the pot on a burner, and while she waited for it to boil, she unpacked her dual cassette CD player. Remember, this is the year 2000. And fed it her new Macy Gray disc. Her new one. Next was a treasure hunt for her corkscrew and wine glasses. After scavenging through 5 boxes failed to deliver the glasses, she just poured herself a hearty coffee mug of wine. The water on the stove now roiled in a frenzy. A couple of handfuls of penny pasta calmed its rapids with some sizzle and steam. Mug of wine in one hand and wooden spoon in the other, Kate rubbed against the stove knobs as she swayed her hips and sang about getting choked up as she said goodbye and walked away from her man. Well, not her, of course. It was only the lyrics to Macy Gray's I Try playing in the other room. Do you remember that song? By the ripe old age of 24, Kate herself had said goodbye to and walked away from plenty of guys with no issue. She was a pro at the clean break. Dex was the exception, though. Her goodbye and walking away from him had literally been saying the word and repeatedly moving one foot in front of the other in a direction that was not towards his condo. But figuratively speaking, she hadn't so much walked away as taken a step back. Moving out was not breaking up. She only wanted some space. In fact, she'd ended up calling Dex from the rummage sale that afternoon to ask if he could hold off on coming over until later that evening. She had dinner plans with herself. Maybe she would have her new purse pull up a chair too. The kitchen was too hot for comfortably eating at her little bistro table, though, so sitting on her futon and leaning over her resale coffee table in the living room would have to do. The purse could sit on Olive's old burgundy wingback. It took Kate all of 30 seconds to conclude how pathetic her freedom already was. After straining her al dente pasta and stirring in some pesto, I ate that all the time at that age, she took her mug and plate to the living room, sank onto her futon, and kicked her feet to the stereo's mellow beat. She did not invite the purse to join her. She just meditated on the gloriousness that should be living on her own. Before long, though, sounds of scratching and rhythmic bumping interrupted her peace. It came from behind her, from the apartment next door. And there was something else. Was it music? Kate pressed her ear to the shared wall. Yes, the faint, jazzy strains of the neighbor's music were vibrating through the yellowed wall. Kate shrugged and returned her attention to Macy and Merlot, but after eating a little and drinking a lot, she noticed it had become like a meat locker in there. Getting up to turn the AC down, she powered off the stereo as well, all the better to hear the music next door. She likewise clicked off the sconce lighting that jaundiced the yellow wall wore like a pair of earrings. Settling onto her futon under a chenille throw, she bent one knee upward and rocked it side to side to the dreamy big band jazz melody. It was faint but unmistakable. Undoubtedly another senior citizen lived next door. They were probably playing it on a phonograph too. And yet, hadn't Kate seen a gorgeous brunette walk out of her building block that afternoon? Or at least the gorgeous backside of a brunette? He could have just been visiting a friend, she figured, a girlfriend maybe, or a boyfriend. But he could be straight and single and live in Camden Court, in his studio and alone, like her. And if so, there were only so many apartments in her wing of the U-shaped building. Maybe 4 to a floor for 4 floors, which would make 16 units. A lot to choose from, but still, there was a 25% chance he could live on her floor. Kate liked those odds. Swinging her knee to the rhythm, she imagined how terribly attractive it would be for a guy like that to be listening to music like this. That might be just about perfection. Closing her eyes, she encouraged the fantasy. Where should she begin? Oh, yes. No longer fully clothed on the futon, but reclining on the hot neighbor's soft leather sofa, wrapped in a cashmere blanket and wearing nothing underneath it. She stopped rocking her knee and spread it out to the side. Hot neighbor's face is difficult to see in the flickering candlelight as he approaches the sofa. Once he's close enough for me to almost make out his features, he immediately drops his head to my neck, sucking and lapping at my skin like it's cream. He moves his way down, peeling away the cashmere while he does so. I draw my chin to his chest to watch his thick mass of wavy dark brown hair dust over my breasts and zigzag across my stomach as the flesh there yields to the press of his lips. For a moment, Kate considered getting up to fetch her vibrator. Good old Dickie Greenleaf, which was indeed green and indulged Kate's obsession with Jude Law and the talented Mr. Ripley. But Dickie couldn't happen tonight. Even in her stupor, Kate remembered Dex was due to arrive at some point. She'd left the door unlocked for him so he could easily catch her in the act, and getting up now to lock it would ruin the moment, as would getting up to fetch the vibrator. No matter, Kate whispered, willing to take the matter into her own expert hands. Carry on, lover. Hidden beneath the chenille blanket, her fingers ducked under the waist of her shorts, then the elastic band of her panties at the same time hot neighbor's mouth moved south. His strong, smooth hands reach up to circle and squeeze my breasts, then descend to massage the small of my waist. I still can't see his face, but oh, what a marvelous mouth he has as he takes his time and gradually, so delicately, homes in between my thighs and skillfully uses his tongue to part my lips brushed against hers. Without opening her eyes, Kate slowly and quietly pulled her hand from her shorts and lifted the other to clasp short, straight hair. She clutched it so she couldn't feel the fine texture anymore and pulled the face more firmly onto hers, parting the lips with her tongue and hearing not jazz notes but the thuds of dropped plastic shopping bags. A few seconds later, the other mouth detached to say, "Been a while since you kissed like that. Glad I didn't scare—" Shh, no talking. Keeping her eyelids firmly clenched, she blocked out the familiar voice to just feel the body swivel from the side of the futon to a position parallel above her. They carried on kissing for a while, but the voice reemerged between lip smacks. Didn't mean to. Sneak in. Sounded so quiet from the hall. Didn't want to wake you if you were asleep. Kate jammed her tongue into Dex's mouth to wrestle his down. He gave a soft moan that communicated he was pleased enough getting to second base like this, but Kate wasn't. Still feeling the tingling tickle of that wavy-haired head between her thighs, she impatiently pulled off her t-shirt, unclasped her bra, then flipped Dex's shirt inside out above his head and off his arms. Flies couldn't be undone quickly enough as they grabbed and tugged and fiddled with one another's shorts. Okay, and so this just goes on and on, where she just kind of has her little fantasy, and then her boyfriend ends up showing up in the process, and then she ends up screwing around a little with him. And at this point, I feel like, well, that ends that scene. So to go back to some of my Easter eggs, some of this drawing from my romantic life, I guess. Well, the Macy Gray song, I Try, just reminded me of one guy I dated, and I had worked with him, like Kate works with Dex. And before we dated, I just remember one time he was working late at the office and I was already home, and he called just to see what's up. And he played that song over the phone to me. And I didn't really realize at the time that I was being wooed. But after a while, I figured out that's what was happening. And so that was just kind of like a little silly sentimental thing from my 20s. And I do love that song still. It's great. The IKEA pot and, you know, just some of her wares, and again, the furnishings, and yeah, even Dickie Greenleaf. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine was engaged, and I had a bachelorette party where a woman came with a suitcase filled with sex toys. And so she was peddling her wares. I had never seen a vibrator before, so I just was curious, and I bought one, and it was green, and it had like a imprint of a leaf on it. And so I was like, well, there you go, because I absolutely was obsessed with Jude Law as Dickie Greenleaf in The Talented Mr. Ripley. But just as sort of a disclaimer for like the really saucy descriptions in here, that is not typically what I write, which maybe is a bad thing in your opinion. You know, everyone likes different things. But I always have romantic elements in my books, but I don't write romances. At least I don't consider them to be. But after having written, you know, my previous manuscript and having a hard time finding, you know, a place for it with a publisher. Meanwhile, I was editing romance and just seeing that genre booming out there. And so I just thought, well, maybe I'll try my hand at that. I'll try romance. And I wanted to query romance publishers accordingly, and knowing that if they asked for a sample, you know, maybe they'd be getting the first chapter or two. So I tried to front load as much of sauciness as I felt I could into the early chapters, so that it could be seen right away that there would be romance flowing through this story. But again, it's not, that was me just kind of having fun with her like fantasies in her mind with like the very like kind of cheesy way of writing romance. But you know, that's not, yeah, I typically don't get to, maybe I should say I'm more of a fade to black typically. So anyways, I do quickly describe a little scene with her and Dexter, again, trying to get my foot in the door of romance. Just for it to get accepted by a romance publisher, and then have reviews by romance readers saying they liked it, but this wasn't a romance. So it's like, okay, well, just as well. I don't think that that's my genre. But like I said, I love a love story, and so there's definitely that going through. It's definitely centered on romantic relationships, even if it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty details. But so that was me having fun with that, and I guess I do a little bit later too. Why not? But anyway, the aftermath consisted of an hour of spooning and pillow talk while they sipped some Chianti Dex had brought over. Oh my God, I drank so much Chianti in my 20s. He'd also brought a movie rental of The Sixth Sense and the Ben & Jerry's ice cream now melting on the floor. They had a good laugh over Kate's bathroom incident too, but right after that, Kate rolled him out of bed under the pretense of feeling disorganized and claustrophobic with her apartment still in shambles. It would simply be easier if he went home and let her get an early start the next day. Just come back to our place and sleep, he replied, his light brown hair still tousled from their romp. Your place. My place. Fine. But just sleep in a real bed to get good rest for attacking all this shit tomorrow. I'll help you. Just sleep or unpack. Both. Well, maybe not so much sleep, he said with a nudge. Thanks, but I can do both just fine on my own. Now, please, I'm begging you. It's been a really, really long day. He left with dejection shading his deep aqua eyes, but holding fast to a rain check for that video. Before it was due back at Blockbuster and he'd get charged late fee. Again, sense of time. 2000. Shutting the door behind him, Kate flicked the switch to turn the sconces back on and kill the atmosphere entirely. It couldn't be a good thing for reality to so consistently fall short of fantasy. She needed to confront things as they were, see them plain as day, and learn to be satisfied with that. Starting with those scratches on her front door. Slapping a couple of layers of fresh white paint on there couldn't hide the fact that Agatha had clawed a sizable strip out of it. Kate looked around the room and wondered where Olive's body had lain when they'd found it. Perhaps where she and Dex just were, over against the yellow wall. Shimmying her shoulders in disgust, she thought of all the people who had lived and maybe died in this building before her. The music next door had stopped, perhaps already had some time ago, while she and Dex had been, what, making love? Just passing the time? What was it that she'd really wanted when she'd walked out of that lakeshore condo? Suddenly, she couldn't breathe as the responsibility for Dexter's heart crushed down on her own. Absence was only making things foggier so far. Blowing her long, toffee-colored bangs out of her eyes, Kate wasn't in the mood to analyze the state of them just now. Instead, she looked to the evening bag still sitting on the floor where she'd left it after the estate sale. With a smile, she walked over to play with it again, thinking of when she could first use it and what she'd wear. Holding it by its strap, her eyes focused in on the beaded detail. It was like staring into the night sky, a private observatory of her own. As she zoned in on the twinkling and tried to find constellations in its pattern, her ears filled with what sounded like water running. She checked her bathroom just to be sure and figured it must be a neighbor. Just the pipes and strange acoustics in the old building. The volume and intensity of the water increased, though, until it seemed all around her. She could almost feel drops streaming down, then beating on her skin. The blood cascaded through her veins with a new coolness, and an overwhelming scent of lilac dizzied her. As the sound of running water surged in her ears, Kate gripped the purse tightly. She swept open its dazzling lid and stared into the remnants of the old mirror at her dilated brown eyes, at her flushed and pale skin. In a flicker, there then gone, she saw something else. A pair of fogged green eyes staring back. Thus ends part 1 of the book. Before getting into part 2, where we get introduced to our 1920s thread and the Sixth Sense, I know I planted in there because, well, first of all, just looking at, what movies were out at that time and would have been out on video at Blockbuster in the year 2000 by that summer. But that one just always stands out in my head as infamously being spoiled for me. I remember being in my office cubicle and hearing someone basically say the twist over in the next row. And I must have let out an audible, "Woo!" Then I just heard the woman go, "Oh no, I'm sorry, has someone not seen it?" Like, yeah. So then I was like, "Rosebud's a sled!" Which, if you know what movie I'm talking about there, I'm sorry, I just spoiled that one for you too. But anyway, yeah, so just silliness. In these opening chapters, I'm very much like walking my way back into that time and kind of getting reacquainted with it and having fun with it. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot to go back to the damn cat. Okay, so the story with the cat was that this one guy I was dating, not the one who played Macy Gray for me, but another guy that I met. He did work at the Adler Planetarium, and I met him when I was volunteering there. And we lived in the same apartment building, the one the book is based on. And separate studio apartments in different portions of the building. And but anyway, I guess we had dated for long enough that it was getting kind of serious. And so we made the big step of adopting a cat together. And she lived with him. And I had visitation rights, even after we broke up, actually, which was nice. But so the cat did what the cat in the story does, where we were sitting in probably on his futon too in his studio, and the cat was in the corner by the door to the unit and just like, yeah, bopping around as if like someone was dangling a toy above its head, but there was nothing there, and there was no like light shining reflecting off of watches or anything. It was just, there was nothing. We didn't know, but this cat was really like intently watching and kind of like playing around. And so that was like, ooh, because my boyfriend had just moved into this apartment because it became available because an elderly woman had just passed away, the woman who lived there, and she died there. And she was found, like Olive, a few days into it. as we learned from the next door neighbor. And he talked about how this woman, he would notice when he was coming and going, she would often be standing in the doorway, peeking out her door. Like, I don't know if she was just really paranoid and just trying to keep an eye out or what was going on. But he's like, she was hovering in her doorway all the time. So we were like, oh my God, she was hanging out in the doorway, and that's where the cat was reacting so much. So we're like, does this woman, is she haunting this studio apartment? Oh my God. So you can imagine, I may have run with that idea a little further than that as the story progresses, but I don't know. You have to read it to find out. Otherwise, the year 2000 story thread, I wanted to be the relatable thread, the most realistic one, other than some of these weird experiences Kate has, like commencing with the cat dancing in her apartment and these green eyes that she sees reflected back at her in this little purse. So as like the mystery of that unfolds, she also continues to live her, day-to-day life, negotiating what her relationship is with Dexter through that. We have some workplace scenes, we have some workplace tension and stuff like that. So that was to offset some of the melodrama almost that comes into the 1920s thread. I let myself, with the truly historical bit of it, really like go to town with, like, I don't want to say it's soap opera, but like that one gets a lot more dramatic. Very, very intense love affair happening through that. And so to kind of like balance out the intensity of that, I deliberately wanted it to be kind of, I don't want to say mundane as in boring, but that's the feedback I always get. Like, everyone loves the 1920s part of this story, and the present day one, or the year 2000 thread of it, they're just like, yeah, it was all right. But like, I just felt like, for me, things are scariest when it feels like something that could actually happen to me in my life. So I just felt like writing a story that very much felt like my life and how I'd be living it day to day if like these little strange unexplained things were happening. Like, that would scare the piss out of me, and I don't need a ghost like in my face going boo to do that. And it also becomes more of an investigation too, as Kate just starts to research and learn more about this woman who lived in this unit and how that got intertwined in this big drama that unfolds, or that had unfolded in the 1920s, and is now just having kind of a ripple effect into Kate's life now, if that makes any sense. But anyway, I will end this here. I would love to come back at some point, though, to introduce the 1920s thread of that. And in the meantime, thanks for sitting through my story time if you joined me here, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.